Welcome in to the Devy Devotional Podcast, a show devoted to all things Devy and C2C. Hosted by John Arrington and Aaron Wilcox. This dynamic duo brings you actionable strategies with player-driven analysis for your Devy and C2C leagues. Let's dive in.
Let's dive into the new Optimus Fantasy Devy show. Welcome into the Devy Devotional, where we stay devoted to Devy. I'm your host, Dynasty Coach A, joined as always by Aaron Wilcox at Aaron Wilcox 86 on Twitter. And tonight we're very excited to do our first pod on the Optimus Fantasy feed. The Devy Devotional is not a new podcast, but we are new to the feed, obviously. So hopefully we're bringing in some new listeners. We hope you will enjoy this podcast. Obviously, we are a pod of the people. If you ever have any requests, anything you want to talk about, join us here on YouTube, on Twitter, wherever. Just reach out, comment, do all that kind of stuff, and we will answer your questions, do all that kind of stuff. We already have some people in here. We got FF Tyler O. Can't freaking wait. And Beth, we trust. You guys will learn all about Beth if you're new. Toronto Dave already knows all about that. We got Brad Bolt all the way over from Australia. I was talking to him earlier on. Hell yeah, guys, pumped for this. Shout out from Australia. He's working early this morning for him, or tomorrow morning, I guess it is. We got Herms in the chat. Shout out Optimus Gang, of course. And then Dante Moore, Devy QB1. Next question. All right, I'm not so sure about that one, but we do love yours. So yeah, we can't appreciate enough how much you guys are, getting the excitement that you guys are giving us and everything for the new podcast. We're excited to be with Optimus Fantasy, of course. But tonight we are here to Tyler's talking about my clock. That's my clock that he's talking about, the giant clock. So sometimes he misses the L, but tonight we're going to be talking about C2C sleepers. Now, normally we stick to the Devy game. Tonight we wanted to dive a little bit deeper. We talked last week about 2 weeks ago about the 2025 draft class. We got into some deeper players for Devy purposes and everything, but tonight we really wanted to get into the C2C sleepers, some of those names that you've never heard of, and probably rightfully so. But if you're in these C2C leagues, Aaron and I are in a C2C startup as we speak. We're going to need to know these names. You're going to need to know these names if you're in those kind of leagues. And, sometimes it works out. You get that Kamani Vidal or somebody like that, ends up being a third round pick in your rookie drafts. And you thought it was just going to be a C2C sleeper. And, maybe we'll get one of those kind of players today. But first, of course, I have to bring on Aaron and check you out. How are you doing tonight, buddy?
Hey, I'm doing well. And yeah, this is super exciting. Unveiling this tonight is awesome, and I can't wait to talk about, one of our favorite topics, C2C, so campus to Canton. And I guess for anybody who's just new to the format, like Devy is basically a dynasty league that has these college players, basically a taxi squad of college players, and then campus to Canton, you're actually starting these guys every week. So we want to know, we're going to dive into some deeper guys tonight, and you really want to identify which guys could potentially score and have a little bit of NFL upside or potential. So I'm excited to get into that tonight.
Absolutely. So do you have, before we actually dive into the players, do you have a way that you approach finding these sleepers? Because I have my way, which is, utilizing Devy Beth, just seeing who's standing out in the metrics that I look for that maybe show, like if it's a quarterback, the big playability, the big time throw rate, the intended air yards beyond a certain amount, showing that they're actually pushing the ball down the field, scoring big plays. They're not just dinking and dunking. But honestly, sometimes the dinking and dunking can work as well. It just really depends. But, if you're doing it enough, of course, that's going to matter. But, for running backs, I'm looking for, PPR points per touch. I'm looking for the big time run rate and things like that. And then wide receivers, it's kind of the same thing, like the PPR points per touch, yards per reception, showing that big playability. Because I love the players that can score, especially for C2C, they can score you, 12 points on one play, or, whatever it might be, compared to a guy like Luther Burton that's going to get, like 2 points here, 3 points there, that kind of thing. I always got to get my dig in on Burton.
That's fair. So to start with, there are always guys deep in drafts where they're stepping into a lot of opportunity. And it's just kind of feeling out which guys actually have a sliver of NFL upside. So, for example, are they Power 5 or G5? So if they're at a lower level of competition, I'm probably knocking them a little bit. They have to be really quite good as a prospect for me to really care about them. In a C2C league, I mean, you can draft those guys, but I mean, you don't want to load up your roster with guys who are absolute like 0% or 1% or whatever it would be NFL chances. You want some guys who could potentially step into something more and go to your NFL squad. So that's the first thing. I'm kind of differentiating, what level are they playing at, and then also the opportunity. So yes, we want talented guys, but we also want talented guys who are getting some sort of opportunity. So a lot of times later when you're trying to dig up some sleepers, they are guys who have maybe been overshadowed or maybe transferring into a very promising situation. And I also, me, I go really deep into the freshman scouting. So for example, if I really liked a guy coming out and then just some sort of circumstance happened where maybe they didn't hit right away, usually they get bumped way down the ranks, and occasionally those guys can really pan out in a big way. Not everybody always ends up hitting year one in college. So those are just a couple of quick things that go into my process, but I mean, it's more nuanced to that, but I don't necessarily have a model like you were outlining with yours. So, I mean, yours is going to spit out some guys that you'll be able to, I guess, look into like, why are they going so late, and a little bit, if they're promising in your model, then that gives you a lot of an easier path, I guess, to discovering these guys versus mine's kind of just grinding really hard, looking into reports from teams, again, looking into production, leaving, who's entering the depth chart, things like that.
I will say sometimes you would think it should be just easy. I just go down a list and pick whoever, but sometimes it's difficult because Devy Beth was created for Devy purposes, just figure out who's going to make it to the NFL. And that doesn't always mean who's going to score the most fantasy points and things like that. It's just not what it was built for. Maybe I should probably spend some time, and I did it to where it was working in season. It was finding those players, but it's not necessarily like a long-term thing that I've built so far for looking for the players that are scoring the most points and all that kind of stuff. So I don't know. Maybe that's something I got to work on here. We've been talking for 8 minutes. We already have Jamie in the chat. Yo, what up? It's his new favorite podcast. 8 minutes in, we already got a new one transferred over. You love to see it. But all right, that's enough about that. Why don't we go ahead and dive into the good stuff, and we will be right back. Like I said, right back. So we're going to go ahead and start off here with the QBs. And honestly, we didn't even have any. Aaron didn't have any QBs listed. I went ahead and threw 3 on here. I actually have a 4th that I'm going to be talking about here. But I just figured we had to talk at least about some quarterbacks. At least one of these is probably cheating a little bit, but I feel like Rocco Becht isn't still not getting enough love, and so I'm still calling him a sleeper. He's going as the QB 50 overall in C2C drafts right now, and 183rd overall in ADP. That still seems too low, especially I don't know about Aaron. I do know that Aaron's in a 3 QB league. I'm in a 3 QB C2C league where it's not like super flex. It's none of that. It's literally 3 QB. You have to start 3 QB. And in that, obviously it doesn't necessarily change where Rocco Becht should be going, but the importance of him as a player should be more important, especially for the 183rd overall. What are we talking about? 15 rounds, something like that at that point. So I'd much rather have a Rocco Becht earlier than that. So it's a little bit of a cheating because it's not like a deep C2C sleeper or anything. And he's definitely getting more buzz here. But I just want to, we've talked about him in the past, but I wanted to start the show off with Rocco because I feel like I really feel like he's going to take a big step this year. And so even if he's not necessarily a sleeper, he's somebody that you should probably push up your ranks a little bit.
Yeah, and he is a guy that's been growing on me too. So I'm with you there. I like that. He has an intact receiving core at Iowa State there. They're coming back. The top 2 producers. There's consistency there, I guess. And then the up and coming Abu Sama, good running back. And Rocco Becht, ultimately, he's flashed enough traits-wise where he's got my attention. And at the very least, probably a good campus producer. this season and maybe some of that NFL upside. So we know he's young, high upside for maybe multiple years on your roster. Might as well take a shot there while his value is still depressed. So I selected him pretty late in a draft early this offseason. I think he's creeping up. More and more folks are talking about him, including us. But yeah, still qualifies as a sleeper. And you are right that I didn't necessarily put any quarterbacks. Nobody just came to mind when I was roughly just jotting down some guys onto this list. But I would say maybe another guy to mention briefly is Josh Hoover, TCU quarterback. He's been getting some talk amongst folks in the Devy C2C circles, and he really ended the year on a high note for TCU, and he's been recovering this spring, though, from an injury. So I'm anticipating him to be the starter. That's what the team is reporting, and just know that he's a guy who could score a lot on the campus side, maybe a sliver of NFL upside there. But again, he's somebody who's not going to be the deepest of deep sleepers too. I mean, he's similar to Rocco in that way, where if you're in a supplemental draft, you might have to take him in those mid rounds, but certainly like a guy I just selected in one of my drafts here, which was kind of depleted, but I believe it was in like the 7th round, for example, around that range. So Josh Hoover is a guy I wanted to shout out to.
Yeah, I like the Hoover call out. I mean, you don't get too excited about TCU, but I mean, the Big 12's kind of falling apart now. Like TCU, they're still in the Big 12, right? Because I keep getting it all mixed up with all the new, conferences and everything. But as far as I'm concerned, as far as I know, TCU is still in the Big 12, and the Big 12 is closer to like the American Conference now than it is to like the SEC or something like that.
Yeah, true.
So I don't mind the call out there. I have another one that's kind of cheating a little bit. Trust me, these are not all going to be cheating. We're just starting out, we're starting out easy, starting out simple here. But it's Cam Rising. And I really think Cameron Rising out of Utah, I really think that he's just kind of forgotten about a little bit because he missed all of last year, most of last year. I think it was all of last year. But I mean, he put up 2 pretty substantial seasons before that. And now, like in 2022, he had over 3,000 yards passing. He had 26 passing touchdowns, 8 interceptions. Like the dude was on fire. Like that's not like amazing. That's not going to win your league or anything. But especially once again, like a 2-3 QB league, that that's definitely going to be a player that you're going to want to start in most weeks. But his number one wide receiver, his number one receiving option that year was Dalton Kincaid. He didn't even have a receiver that went over like 500 receiving yards. This year he has Dorian Singer that we've touched on quite a bit. And I mean, all you hear about the entire offseason is the Dorian Singer, Cam Rising connection, how great it's going to be. They hit it off big in the spring, in spring practices, spring game, all that kind of good stuff. I really think it could be a big year for both players. And so Cam Rising's going as the QB 65 and 340 overall right now. So, I mean, that just shows you how deep he's going. So it's kind of cheating still. Like we're not getting into like the hundreds range or anything, but I mean, 340 overall is pretty late, fairly late. So it's not like your normal sleeper, but yeah, just don't forget about Cam Rising because like I said, I think it could be a big year for both of them.
Yeah, and he is another guy that you're right, he has been forgotten. I don't know that I'm expecting the NFL upside from him. I'll be honest, but in a down class, yeah, I guess never say never. And so, like you said, he has that opportunity to put up some points this season, which is valuable in C2C leagues. Like especially if it's a deeper one, or maybe it's just a 3 QB one, some sort of incentive for the quarterbacks. You want guys who are going to be able to, I guess, bring some sort of nice return at a discount. And currently Cam Rising, there's a heavy discount on him for sure.
And Herms is in the chat saying, get in now before his ADP starts rising.
Ooh, that was good. That was good.
You like nice it. Trust me, Brad, we are going to talk about Connor Wegman a lot. Actually, we talked about Connor Wegman last week on the previous podcast. So, I mean, the Cliff Notes, we like him. We will say that, but he's not going to be on our sleepers pod because we like him quite a bit.
Right. He's too highly ranked, unfortunately, but that's a good thing for him. I mean, he's a good player. So go check out that past pod. Yeah.
Yeah, he could be a sleeper for the 2025 class, but I don't think he's a sleeper for C2C purposes. I'll give you that. But this player is actually a sleeper. He's completely undrafted in C2C ADP right now. And I don't really understand why, except for people hate Pitt. They hate Kenny Pickett came out and was terrible in the NFL. And so no other QB could ever be good for anything or whatever. But Nate Yarnell was really good towards the end of last season. I've talked about him a couple times now, but like nothing seems to change. When the first time I brought him up on the pod, you kind of gave me this look like, who the hell are you talking about? And then I proceeded to go over the stats of the two games. One of the games was a bowl game, so obviously it was pretty important, and he just smashed in those games. But I didn't have a guarantee that he was going to be a starter or anything like that. Since then, he's actually been guaranteed the start. Like the coaches come out and said, he's the starter, he's our guy, blah, blah, blah. So now we have this 6'6", 215-pound starter that's basically guaranteed to playing time. And in basically two games of playing last year, he threw almost 600 yards and 4 touchdowns. So you're telling me you don't want that player? You don't want to draft that player at any point in your draft? Like it makes no sense to me. So this is a true sleeper here. Nate Yarnell out of Pitt, not getting any love whatsoever, except for by the Devy Devotional. And hopefully you guys will be able to take advantage of that. I know I will be in all of my C2C drafts.
Yeah, I don't mind that as far as like a deep sleeper, like end of the draft type of guy, because ultimately they did bring in former Alabama quarterback Eli Holstein, who was a freshman after last season. They brought him in this spring, and at this time, Yarnell is still the starter. The coaches, like you said, have said that, but that doesn't mean that a talented former QB9 in the entire class, Holstein last year, he has an opportunity to certainly take that job. I'm not a Holstein truther or anything like that. I did not think he was good enough to start at Bama, but good enough to start at Pitt, potentially. But like you said, it's a cost thing with Yarnell. Take a shot on a guy who has flashed, and everybody seems to be quite down on the Pitt team, and maybe that's deserved, but we'll see. And if I may, I want to throw out just another quarterback sleeper here, but that would be a guy going to USC, Jaden Maeva. Actually, so I just don't know that we can really depend on Miller Moss as the QB there at USC. The guy is just. He's been behind Caleb Williams, so I guess at the end of the day, you can't hold too much against him for that. But Maeva's coming in, and he has some legit starting experience. He really flashed this last season. He had a pretty impressive game log there, and I've been hearing some good things. Not that he's like overtaken Miller Moss yet, but Miller Moss, he's had some days where he struggled this spring. So I think at the end of the day, Moss is definitely not like safe. You've seen Lincoln Riley be able to pivot off of guys like Spencer Rattler, who have been the locked-in starters if a guy behind him is better. He's not afraid to do it, especially with USC always having high expectations of a functional offense. So I think that Maeva, he's kind of a sleeper at this point. He's maybe not the last couple rounds in a supplemental, but 8th, 9th, 10th, 11th, you might see him there in your league. So certainly keep an eye out on him or eye out for him. I think he's a talented kid for sure.
I was actually going to mention Maeva, but I looked at his ADP, and it definitely seems like it's creeping up there. So that's why I didn't include him. So I don't mind bringing him up or anything, because obviously every draft's going to be a little different. Maybe he slips through your draft, and you're able to pick him up pretty late. But it seems like, especially for like the C2C boys, like they're pushing him up. He's getting into like the 30s or something like that for their rankings and everything. But yeah, like I said, I don't mind the call at all, and I was going to it as well, because we've never been. I can't even think of the other guy's name right now. We've never
the Miller Moss.
Miller Moss. Yeah, we've never been Miller Moss fans like at all, and I've been one of his biggest opponents. So But the funny thing is, I actually have Maeva and Moss like ranked fairly similarly, but I have Maeva 2 spots ahead. So I guess I'm a huge Maeva guy.
I guess so. And he actually just went in the 10th round of my supplemental, and this is a 3 QB league, which is
Oh, wow.
depleted free agency pool. So I mean that's certainly kind of late.
Yeah.
So just check
No,
your
that is late.
leagues. Yeah, keep
No,
them
yeah,
in that
that I
queue.
mean, if you can get them around that price, that's amazing. Because Miller Moss is not guaranteed anything. That's the best way to put it, Like, and so if you can get a guy in the 10th round of a supplemental and a 3 QB league, yeah, that's amazing. The only other quarterback I want to touch on is we're not even going to spend a lot of time on him is Hank Brown out of Auburn. I can't go through a quarterback pod and not talk about Hank Brown. He has not been guaranteed the starting position like I thought he was going to so far. Peyton Thorne is just a god awful quarterback. It's kind of like what we were just saying with Miller Moss. Like he's just not good, and so I really feel like Hank Brown's going to get a shot at some point, and I feel like he should be. He should be considered a sleeper, especially for C2C purposes, because we're excited about that Auburn core, wide receiver core, and everything. We're excited about that Auburn offense for once, which is pretty weird to say, but we should probably be excited about their quarterback as well. I'm not excited about Peyton Thorne. I can promise you that. And Jamie, it says where we've been all of his life. This is freaking awesome. Well, we appreciate you, buddy. You're awesome. So, speaking of awesome, it's time to get into the awesome running backs. We already know that the 2025 running back class is pretty awesome, but we still have some sleepers out there. So we will be right back. And we're back. So we got some running backs now that we're going to talk about. And I think that the first one is a player that we talked about probably about 3 or 4 pods ago. And I feel like he would be getting a lot more steam if maybe he was a slightly bigger. But, I think he actually maybe gained a little bit of weight over the offseason and everything. So maybe he can hit those thresholds where people start getting excited about him. Why don't you start us off with the first running back here?
Yeah, so that's Jadarian Price. He's a Notre Dame back, going to be a third-year player. He missed his first season, the entirety, I believe, just due to that Achilles injury, but he actually bounced back quite nicely considering the severity of an injury like that. So he was a good recruit coming out, and then this last season, even behind Audric Estime and having to compete with other backs in that backfield, he flashed, and he certainly in that very final game of the season kind of asserted himself as potentially that next guy up, and we want that guy at Notre Dame. Every year, that seems to be a very profitable position to be in. And I mean, Pricey has some of the recruiting pedigree. He has enough size. You touched on it already. He's listed around 201 to 203 in every current source I can find. But if you look at some of the pictures out there too, I mean, the guy looks like he's about 210. So I'm not going to speculate too much that he's for sure 210, but I think that there's certainly a good chance that he's going to be 210 by the time he gets to the NFL. And we like that. That's like a Jonathan Brooks type of build. And I think that, I'm not even comping the guys necessarily, but I don't think that's the worst comp out there. I honestly think that he needs to take a huge step forward, Price that is, but he has the opportunity ahead of him. And I just don't know. I mean, you could talk about maybe the freshman coming in and factoring in at some point, but he just needs one really solid season here at Notre Dame, maybe 2 seasons. We'll see what happens to really assert himself as a good Devy running back, plus some CFF upside, if nothing else.
Yeah, I like the call. I actually had him listed at 190. So if you're seeing closer to 200 or a little over, that's just that much better. And honestly, like I only care about that for Devy purposes. I don't even really care necessarily for C2C purposes. As long as you can touch the rock and score points, I don't really care what size you are. But obviously, Deuce Vaughn was an amazing player for C2C purposes, but he was a teeny tiny guy and is not scoring points in the NFL for us. So like I don't care about that. But honestly, like I might even start considering Price for NFL purposes, for Devy purposes, if he's over that 200 range, if he can stay over there. And, we've talked about Kedren Young, I should say, how we love him, or at least I loved him. I think you were on board as well. But that doesn't mean that Price wasn't an exciting player. I think more than anything, it's getting it's getting Jeremiah Love the hell out of there, getting him out of the mix. If we could get a 1-2 punch of Keedron Young and Jadarian Price, I'd be pretty damn happy. I mean, Price has the almost 11% big time run rate. He has the PPR points per touch. He's not a huge player in the receiving game. Like he doesn't have like a huge receiving profile or anything like that. So, that's a little bit of a knock for C2C purposes because you're not going to get those PPR points and everything, but he can break those big plays. So, I still, especially as a sleeper, I like the call. And he's going as RB 77 and 272 overall in C2C drafts right now. So, I mean, I definitely would have him much higher than that.
Yeah, and just because he didn't put up some receiving production thus far in college doesn't mean he can't. Like, you go back to high school, and he was a very competent receiver, both his junior and senior seasons, almost 30 receptions each year, and very efficient with those. So it seems like the receiving ability is there. It's just we'll see what it is. But yes, that weight should be updated now. It's updated on the team site and ESPN and some of these other services. So that could be an exciting boost in Beth for sure.
It was. It moved him up about 20 spots. So I'm not gonna lie. I mean, he was already. I already liked him as a sleeper call, and then he told me he was over 200. I was like, wait a second, this is gonna change things even more. But
yeah, and for relevant like information, I mean, he just went. I got him in the 8th round of this supplemental, and I was super pumped. I did not expect that he would fall, but and I was deep at running back, but you know what? You draft talent. You don't always have to draft for need. So sometimes they'll fall to you, and I got lucky there, I suppose.
Yeah, because I would love to see more trading in C2C leagues. I mean, not to say it doesn't happen at all, but draft for value, draft for the best players, and then trade them because I'd love to see a lot more of those players. A lot of those moves be made, and it doesn't seem to happen as much as we might like, but. Another player that I'm pretty excited about that I thought the whole like campus to Canton world was kind of coming around on, but judging by the ADP, they are not. And it's Quali Conley out of where the hell was he out of? Because I know he's Arizona now, but
was he San Diego or San Jose or one of those?
That's who it was. Yeah, I was thinking San Diego too, but no, it's San Jose State, and he hit a pretty big year last year. But now he transfers over to Arizona. Our boy Jonah Coleman transfers over from Arizona to Washington. Michael Wiley leaves for the NFL. Who does that leave? It leaves Quali Conley. Now, recently, Kedrick Riscano has come over from Ole Miss, but I'm not scared of Kedrick Riscano, man. Like it just he couldn't touch the field as a true freshman. Yes, like obviously he was a well-regarded recruit, and I had him highly ranked. So I mean, I'm not trying to act like I didn't like him or anything like that. Not at all. But I mean, Duke couldn't even touch the field. So like, I'm not gonna be scared of him or scared off of Quali Conley because of him. Not to say that he could never get on the field or do anything like that, but I just feel like at this point in their careers, their college careers, Conley is a better player or better prospect, whatever you want to call it. And he's going as the RB 103 and 291 overall, which seems kind of crazy to me. I have him quite a bit higher than that. But what do you think of Conley? Switching teams, a little bit of little bit of competition coming over, but a lot of competition leaving. What do you think of the Conley call here?
Yeah, and when you mentioned him on one of the last podcasts as a sleeper, I was pretty excited about it. I guess I was a little bit skeptical of the transfer because transferring up a level of competition, even if it isn't to it's not the SEC, but still was a little bit worrisome. I was intrigued, but then now the Riscano thing, that's making me kind of back off of that because I think that Riscano can at least force a committee, if not take the job. Because I mean, Riscano was a high 4-star running back 8 in the entire class this last year. And because he didn't get on the field, I guess I'm not too I mean, I'm disappointed, obviously, but I mean, you have one of the best backs in the nation there at Ole Miss. I guess it wasn't that much of a surprise that Kidrick didn't see a bigger role. So you would have liked to see him do something. So that's obviously concerning if he would have stayed there, for example. But now that he gets a fresh start somewhere, he's a little bit more of that feature back size, like 210 pounds. I think Riscano will cut in to the point where I don't know that Conley is going to have that great CFF ceiling now. And then I'm also a little bit skeptical of like if he'll be able to declare and kind of piggyback off of that to get good opportunity in draft capital. So that is one where I mean, I think I like it as a deep call, but I'm going to let you be the one who is on the Conley train there, John. So you can take, ownership for when he hits big.
So wait, so you're not taking him at RB 103?
No, he's not on my draft board right now in this supplemental.
Wow. Okay. I was not prepared for
know.
this. You got me all excited last time going, oh man, I got to draft Conley, and now you just pulled the rug out from underneath me.
No, this transfer has kind of killed a little bit of that for me, for sure.
All right, we'll have to see who's right. I mean, honestly, like I said, when it's all said and done, Conley has the experience. Kidrick Riscano's never touched a college field, and so like I'm leaning towards go with the the player that's already produced, that's already done it. He's not small. He has the big playability. He has all that kind of stuff. So I get that Riscano definitely could eat into it. I'm just not gonna allow myself to be scared off, especially at that price, the 103. There's a guy that's going somewhere remotely close to that. Well, it says he's going as RB 109. That sounds insane to me because it makes no sense whatsoever. It's Trayon Webb out of Florida. Can you please make this make sense? Because like honestly, of all the players that we're going to talk about tonight, I think this is the one that I disagree with, like the ADP and everything the most. Like this player should be so much higher. I have him so much higher in my ranks. Why is Trayon Webb not getting any love out of Florida?
I have no idea. I considered leaving him off so we could just get all of the Tran Webb out there in drafts. No, the listeners need to hear about Tran Webb, and I actually have him in one league, so we're good. But no, he was a solid 4-star coming out. And I believe like earlier in the process, I mean, he was a top 6 back in the entire class in the composite, and for 247, some big time ranking services love Tran Webb. Yes, he cooled down a little bit after that senior season, but he seems like a guy who's probably like in the 4.4s, maybe 4.5 range. And I don't know if I have a great comp for him necessarily, but his highlights were just always super, super fun. And yeah, he was an early enrollee. He was able to make a good impact as a freshman. I mean, I get you're not going to put a lot of stats out there when you got Trevor Etienne, you got Montrell Johnson out there. Now it's just Montrell, and we know that Montrell's not elite. We know that he's just a fine back. He's kind of borderline SEC quality, I guess I would say, for Montrell. I think Trayon ultimately has the better athleticism and upside. And I mean, he's super young. I mean, he's going into his second season, and if nothing else, he should be set for a huge season, maybe after this one. So maybe a timeshare this season, and then bursting onto the scene as a potential workhorse SEC back the next year. I'm in. Take that shot at that price, especially. So you can get him really late in drafts, probably after the 10th round in the majority of your supplementals.
Yeah, this one just makes no sense to me. I hope those numbers are wrong. I hope it's just not updated because it doesn't make any sense. Like I feel like he should be in like the 30s. So I feel like he should be a Devy option, not even a C2C sleeper or anything like that. Like he is a Devy option for me. I will be drafting him as such. He was the most efficient running back on Florida last year. Now he obviously had the fewest touches of like the main guys, so of course he's going to be more efficient. But it was Trayon Webb up here, and then it was Trevor Etienne down here in the middle, and then it was Montrell Johnson all the way down here as far as efficiency goes. And so I just don't see any reason why it's not going to be the Trayon Webb show this year, even though obviously Montrell Johnson's going to touch the ball, and he's not going to just go away. Like the coaches have proven that they're going to just let him touch the ball for whatever reason. It's not quite to that level, but it's almost like the Jabari Small touching the ball in Tennessee, like that kind of thing. Like for some reason, the coaches just keep putting him out there. But yeah, I don't get it. Trayon Webb has ample size. He has everything we want. And he did well enough in his true freshman season that I feel like we have to yeah, I don't know. We have to draft him a lot earlier than he's going because he is going too late. But this is actually a player, the next guy that you put on the list here was a player that I do not know very much about, or at least I didn't until I actually looked him up right before we got on here. So why don't you tell us about Jombres Dubar?
Yeah, I love Dubar as far as a sleeper option in C2C leagues, especially because at Boise State, we just know that they put out good running backs. I get they're not the biggest, like in the biggest conference, this or that, but year after year, the running back production is there. And now you see George Halani move on. And I mean, there's still a fairly sizable obstacle, we'll say, Gianti there, Ashton Gianti at Boise State. But at the end of the day, we know those coaches like to mix in another guy. I mean, that's been pretty proven to this point in recent years. And Dubar just really fits. I mean, he was able to be a very efficient producer in high school. He was a 10.6 guy in track. That is very fast if you're not familiar with track times. And he's 211 pounds. So you're telling me that this guy projects to be like a 4.4 type of guy? That gets my attention right away when he's that big and that fast. So I don't know what the on the field speed scores are for him, but I'm just very intrigued by the opportunity ahead. Another one very similar to Webb, where I don't know that he's going to have a huge ceiling this year, but he's a great handcuff at the very least. And then the next year, he'll take over most likely at Boise State. And we know that that succession can be very profitable for your C2C teams, for your CFF lineups, and potentially for the NFL, because we know Boise State is one of the exceptions if we're talking about lower levels of competition, putting out NFL quality backs. Well, we know Boise State can do that.
I get your arguments for it, and I mean, he obviously is he's gonna take a step forward as far as touches and things like that because of Halani leaving. I do believe that, so I don't mind the handcuff call and all that kind of stuff, but just looking at what he did in a small-ish sample, but still a decent enough sample where you could probably say it's fairly real. It's not like he touched the ball 8 times or something like that. He touched the ball almost 70 times last year, and he had 0.7 PPR points per touch, which is pretty damn low. And he had a 4.7 big time run, 4.7% big time run rate. That is not what I want to see. I can forgive the small receptions per game and all that kind of stuff because it was a smaller sample. So, like, I'm not even going to talk about that. But it just seems like at least what he was doing last year wasn't showing that track speed. It wasn't showing that amazing athleticism or anything like that. So I don't know if he gained some weight. I don't know what he did, but I just I don't know. I'm kind of all out on this one, kind of like you're all out with the Conley call. I'm all out on Dubar here. I feel like there's somebody else around this range that I'd rather take than Dubar, even if he could possibly be the next guy in line.
Yeah, I mean, I think that there's lots of options around that range which you could pivot to, but you look at what George Halani has done at Boise State. He has multiple 1,000+ yard rushing seasons, and he's been less efficient in every one of those than Dubar was as a freshman. So I mean, Halani has proven that you don't have to be elite to be a great CFF asset at Boise State. So just have patience one more year. You'll have a good CFF starter, or I should say not even good. You might have a potentially great one. And like you said, transitioning to the college game, he probably did put on some weight. 211. I was kind of surprised to see that weight for him. So it might take a little bit of time for him to truly get all of that athleticism back, or maybe he'll slim down slightly. But at the end of the day, 200+ pounds, I'm intrigued, no doubt.
All right, and before we get into the wide receivers, do we really need to touch on this, like, what, 9th-year player in Ches Malusi?
No, I mean, he just as like a super deep guy, like could he be the next Wisconsin back is kind of that train of thought. Like he was somewhat efficient this last season I mean, I wouldn't say a tiny sample size by any means, but there's not really anybody else there at Wisconsin this year. So you know how people go crazy for those system backs, that kind of thing. So he could put up a little bit of flex worthy starting consideration this season, potentially
Yeah,
like a late
and
round guy for the NFL
he's
draft.
going as RB. 127 and 313 overall. So I mean,
He's
he
so
is
cheap.
cheap or free. So I really don't hate it. He's a 6-year player. Like, what are you gonna do? I know he did he started off the season well last year, but now he's coming off the injury. I don't know. I get he's free. Whatever. I guess draft him if you can.
Right. It's a cheap CFF option. Probably not anticipating any NFL upside at this point, or I mean, I guess just the slimmest amount at this point. Yeah.
Jamie wants to know how our Devy knowledge helps us dominate rookie drafts in our dynasty leagues. It helps a lot. Honestly, like all joking aside and like bragging or whatever, I would say at the very least it helps us avoid the misses. Like I'm not going out of my way to draft Xavier Legette. I'm not going out of my way to draft even a Malachi Corley, like the guys like that. Tank Bigsby in the past was somebody that we were both pretty out on, even though everyone loved Tank. And it's just like, it seems so obvious to me, at least. It was just like, this isn't a player that is going to make it in the NFL. And yet everyone seemed to fall in love with them. So I can't guarantee you like every player that I love is going to hit, but a lot of times when I feel really strongly against a player, it works out pretty damn well. So I would say that gives me and Aaron an unfair advantage when it comes into the rookie, because we don't miss on the guys that just were never going to hit. We might miss on the guy that just things didn't work out, injury related, coaches didn't, use them the right way. We might miss on that guy. We're not going to miss on the guy that never had a shot in the NFL.
Yeah, no, I think that summarizes it really well, and just having more knowledge always helps, but you have to be able to react, because we see the opposite where some Devy analysts don't really react, right? They hold on to how these guys were maybe, as a freshman or sophomore or something like that. And then we're either too slow to react, or we just have those biases. Like they burned us in CFF this one season. I hate them. And then they explode, and then they don't really change courses, change opinions fast enough. So I guess there's disadvantages as well from our position. But yes, we need to be able to react. And like John said, there are plenty of advantages to knowing these players in college. That's for sure.
And Brad says he will tolerate no Malachi Corley slander. He's his guy. I'll say for the price, depending on where you're getting him, I mean, it's really not terrible. Like the Legette one is just egregious to me, like where he's going in drafts. But like if you can get Corley in the 4th or 5th, I'll never make fun of somebody for 4th or 5th round pick. Most of them are going to miss anyway, so it's not a big deal. But enough about that. You ready to talk some wide receivers?
Oh yeah, always.
Here we go. All right, so this is going to be the fun one, because the wide receivers is the biggest list that we have. It's going to take the most time, and but I think there's quite a few players, maybe not quite a few. I think there's a few players on this list that are going to be Devy viable when it's all said and done. Whereas we might hope that some of the running backs or some of the QBs make it, but like I feel like if I had to guarantee, I can't guarantee which players they will be just yet, but if I had to say, like, I would guarantee that 2 of these players will end up being Devy viable from the wide receiver list. Like I said, can't say which 2 of they will be just yet. I have a feeling it'll be one of them. It's actually the first one that we're going to talk about here. I think that this one's kind of cheating, because it seems like the ADP makes no sense to me whatsoever, and so that makes me think that he's rising quickly, and so he probably does not count as a sleeper anymore. But I can tell you, even a month ago, 2 months ago, people were not giving Dominic Lovett his due. Like they were not giving him enough love. But so I think that now he's going as the wide receiver 74 in ADP, but he's going as 111th overall. That doesn't make any sense to me. That math ain't mathin'. So that's why I'm saying I feel like he's like really scooting up the board for everyone. But Dominic Lovett basically said, "Hold my beer" to Luther Burden in Burden's true freshman season, and went on to put like 1,000 yards or right around 1,000 yards. Transfers over to Georgia, has a pretty decent year, but obviously he's behind Brock Bowers, he's behind Ladd McConkey, and he had to learn a new system. And obviously Georgia's not the greatest prolific wide receiver system in the history of the world anyway. But if you look at his second half of the season last year, he actually put up some pretty damn good numbers. And if you I don't want to extrapolate and do all that, but like if we can expect that he'll continue to do similar things, especially now Ladd McConkey's gone, Brock Bowers is gone, who's the number one? Probably Dominic Lovett. And yet he still has been kind of forgotten about or whatever. So I feel like he has Devy viability. It's possible that he's going to be that Ricky Pearsall or somebody to that effect that, we say, hey, he can be something in the NFL. He can get better draft capital than we expected, like that kind of thing. But on top of it, even though he's a Georgia wide receiver, I feel like he can kind of take some of that Bowers role because he's the slot guy. He's like the big slot for Georgia. I feel like he can kind of take some of that Bowers role and maybe put up 1,000 yards, like maybe be their first 1,000-yard wide receiver and God knows how long. I don't even know. You might have that information for us, but I feel like he might be able to do that. And maybe he's not that guy that's going to go out and win your CC league, but he can actually score you some points and have that Devy viability while he's doing it.
Yeah, I do think that with the presence of McConkey, and not that McConkey was purely just slots, even though that's where he projects at the NFL level. There had to be some overlap with Lovett, and that probably also deterred his production, definitely influenced that. And like you said, Brock Bowers being there. But yeah, Lovett, he's demonstrated very good skills at the college level. I don't know if they're elite, but they are good. And now he's going to be potentially one of the top guys for who everybody's saying is the QB1 in the 2025 draft class. So that's exciting alone. And it's going to be a great team too. It's going to be a successful college team. Lots of eyes and scouts at those games. So yeah, Dominic Lovett, he's a good one to shout out. And like you said, his ADP is all over the place. So maybe he's not available later in your supplemental drafts. Maybe he was drafted the year before. He might not be in there at all. But at the end of the day, if you're doing a startup or otherwise, you can get him still fairly late, I would imagine.
Yeah, I'm guilty. I drafted him way too early last year. Obviously it didn't work out great for my CDC rosters, but now, like I said, I feel like he might have that Devy viability. So I don't really hate it. Like, if he ends up being a Devy player, I'm not going to mind. I want to say I took him in like the 5th round or something like that of supplementals. Like, I'm not going to hate that, if he ends up on my NFL squad. So another player that might have that opportunity here going to USC is Jacoby Lane. And I think you're getting pretty excited about him. He's another one that it's kind of cheating. Well, not really. He's another one that it seems like he's rising up just as quickly as Lovett. And I think it's more spring practices, spring news, like that kind of thing. All of a sudden he's on radars. And so like ADP's catching up now. So I don't know if he really truly counts as a sleeper anymore, but I will say that like I'm fairly excited about what he can do. I don't love the quarterbacks, unfortunately, but they're gonna have to throw to somebody.
Yeah, and it is a great system, regardless of if the quarterbacks are executing it perfectly or not. But and we're not a podcast who harps on vacated targets and this type of thing. But in reality, somebody has to step up there. They have Zachariah Branch, but then after that, it is wide open. And I don't know if Mekhi Lemon, who's playing defense half the time, he's no Travis Hunter out there. We don't really know how he's going to factor into the offense. I guess we do have Deuce Robinson, but I guess they're similarly big guys. But Jacoby Lane, he was able to really flash even more so than Deuce Robinson towards the end of the season at the very end. And then we see Taj Washington vacating over 1,000 receiving yards. Brendan Rice, almost 800 receiving yards. Mario Williams, 300 receiving yards. Dorian Singer, almost 300. And you just go down the list. It's like, wow, somebody has to catch the ball there. Zachariah Branch isn't going to catch 200 balls for 2,000 yards. It's just not going to happen. So at the end of the day, Jacoby Lane, he's very smooth for a big wide receiver. Like, he truly is kind of like a Drake London. I know that sounds like maybe a lazy comp with the school and everything like that, but he's smooth. He has great big hands. He's not as physical as London is. So he needs to build that. Lane needs to continue to bulk out that frame. He's a bit scrawny or skinny, but he's been working on that. He certainly has bulked up considerably since stepping foot on campus, and there's just nothing but positive buzz about him coming out of the spring. So certainly is a riser, but you can get him late. I think he went in double digit rounds in a early season supplemental this season, and in the draft I was just in, I want to say maybe like the 9th or 10th. So certainly is falling in drafts.
Yeah, I'm excited about Lane. The funny thing is, last year it was Zachariah Branch is the wide receiver 1, Mekhi Lemons the wide receiver 2, like in freshman drafts, like I mean, maybe it wasn't quite that. There was other players mixed in, but like they weren't that far off. And Zachariah Branch was usually considered the wide receiver 1 in the class. I don't have Branch or Lemon in my top 2 USC wide receivers. So I have Lane and Deuce Robinson. I still like. I feel like Deuce had a like quiet, really good true freshman season. All things considered, who was there, the scheme, the offensive system, like all that kind of stuff. I feel like Deuce had a pretty damn good true freshman year. And I mean, he obviously put up more. He ran more routes. He was more efficient than Lane even. I love the explosiveness of Zachariah Branch and all that, but yeah, I feel like if anyone's going to stand out, I really feel like it's going to be Lane or Deuce at this point. And we've been talking about it for a couple pods now, how Zachariah has been a sell for us. So I think that, like just at cost, not necessarily like we hate the guy or anything like that, but just at cost, it seems like you can get somebody a lot better than that. And I had another point and I completely forgot my, oh no, I was going to say, are you comping him to Drake London just because you got a cheap Drake London for $45 earlier today in our CDC draft? Is that why?
That's my first Drake London share, so I haven't really been able to watch a lot
Really?
of London lately, but they certainly remind. Yeah, it's kind of crazy. I don't have more, but I just never had the opportunity, and I liked that one. So, yeah, John and I are in an auction draft right now. DM us if you want some, I guess, just ideas for. It's an auction format, really fun on the NFL side, and then it's going to be a snake draft on the campus side. It would have been chaos to try to do an auction
I
with
know. I
both the
wanted to do
campus
the
and the NFL. Yeah.
I wanted to do the auction. I know you've done that in the past, but I couldn't bring myself. We have some newer players, and I didn't want it to be too much. Honestly, I feel like everyone's been doing great. Keeping up with things. No one's really been lost or anything like that. We have quite a few trades that have already happened, so it's actually been an amazing draft, an amazing process so far. So I do appreciate that. But yeah, Aaron got a cheap Drake London, and I'm not very happy about it. But unfortunately, I was not in a position to block him. So I have quite a few good wide receivers myself, though. We'll see who has the best wide receiver core when it's all said and done. But speaking of the wide receiver core, NC State has a brand new wide receiver core, and you added a player to our sleepers list. Then I added another player to the sleeper list from NC State. And honestly, like I'm pretty excited about both of them. But I will say my player is a little more proven than your player, but maybe your player is a little more has a little more of a pedigree than mine. You want to talk about the players?
Yeah. I'll announce both of them, and we can kind of talk. I'll talk more about one, and you talk more about the other, perhaps. But Noah Rogers was the guy I listed going to NC State, big time Ohio State freshman this last season. Well, I should say big time recruit, but not producer, because he did not play in the regular season. However, or I don't know if maybe he played. He didn't register statistics, but at the end of the day, he was just such a talented guy. He was right there after Carnell Tate in the spring. He was lighting it up in the spring game for Ohio State. He just never found his way onto the field. So we know that's a deep room. If you're going to be a year 1-0, that's a pretty good excuse being at Ohio State. But I will say you always have to be concerned when a guy doesn't do anything. But there's been nothing but additional steady beat drum and praise out of NC State for their offense, and especially for Noah Rogers at the wide receiver position. So he was just a guy that I loved coming out of high school. Very physical, but enough athleticism and movement skills to be an alpha type of guy. And now he's stepping into a situation where they need an outside guy. They have Casey Concepcion, who I think both you and I at this point think is maybe a little overrated in C2C formats, especially with Noah Rogers impressing. Wesley Grimes is the second guy I know you want to talk about who is transferring into NC State. And funny story, I drafted Wesley Grimes when he was coming into college as a freshman late in a draft because he was a great high school producer. Again, it's a little bit of a system thing. I'm finding out that high school system puts out some really great producers, but not always maybe the best prospects. But regardless, Wesley Grimes is a notable producer at the college level, a little bit more proven. So there's some upside for him to take on a big role at NC State as well.
Yeah, and he hasn't done anything amazing, but he's also going undrafted. So I mean, he's somebody free that you can throw on at the end of your drafts and just hope for the best. We're excited about that system. We're excited about Grayson McCall as the quarterback. Like, there's a lot to like about NC State this year, which is not something we've always been able to say. But I think the point is it's an ambiguous situation right now. We can't guarantee that Noah Rogers is going to hit. I can't guarantee that Wesley Grimes is going to hit or that Kevin Concepcion won't be a stud. But we just looking at what Concepcion did last year, it just seems like it was like the only guy in town kind of deal. Now, maybe we're wrong and maybe he's just going to be a stud and like we should draft him wherever. But I feel like there's something like somebody else can step up. And if somebody's going to step up, I feel like Grimes might be that guy because he's the big play guy. That's what he was, at least at Wake Forest. He didn't put up a ton of yards or anything, but he had that 17 yards per reception. He put up 4 touchdowns, the most of anyone, or tied with with anyone else for the most touchdowns for that. While he wasn't a prolific player or anything like that, but he was that big play guy. So if we're looking for Grayson McCall to be able to find somebody, I don't think it's going to be Concepcion. That's not his game. He's more of the underneath, slot kind of deal, whatever, dinks and dunks. And I'm not saying he won't get his, but if we're looking for that big player, then I think it could be Grimes when it's all said and done, or very well could be Rogers, because I know you were maybe not in love with them, but you saw something when he was going to Ohio State where you're like, hey man, this guy could be something. So maybe he just needed to get away from Ohio State and actually get somewhere where he can get into an ambiguous backfield and or a wide receiver core and then actually get on the field.
Yeah, well put.
All right. So the next one is, and I put these in order of how they were going in ADP. So it's not necessarily the order of how we feel about them or anything like that, because I have somebody a little bit later on that I'm like, I love this player and he's going undrafted. But Jalen Moss out of Fresno State, he already put up a pretty damn good year last year. He's going as the wide receiver 96 and 261st overall. And yet, nothing's truly changing for him. He's still at Fresno State. He's still probably going to put up, pretty good year. He's going to help your C2C team. I don't think he's ever going to be Devy viable. I don't think he's going to be an NFL player or anything like that, but he's going to score points for you. So it just 96 just seems a little too low for me. Maybe you grab him at wide receiver 80 or something, because I feel like he could probably take a step forward. He's not super old or anything as far as I know.
Yeah, right. He was redshirt freshman this last season. So I think that's a big part of the intrigue here as a sleeper. It's potentially a multi-year starter on the campus side. However, we do have to be a little wary with this era of the transfer portal. Guys can transfer in and or out really easily. So you can't really bank on multiple years for some of these CFF type of producers. But I will say that Jalen Moss is set up really well with Eric Brooks leaving Fresno State. So that's just going to boost his production. And there is some consistency there with Mikey Keene at quarterback being back there. So I think at the end of the day, Fresno State should be able to put up some stats this season, and he should be able to produce quite well for you, hopefully for multiple years, but slim to no NFL chances there. So it's one of those guys where you have to weigh, do I just need a CFF type of guy, a guy who could be there for a few years for me, or do I want to roll with a little bit more of a Devy shot? That's the conversation or the thought process there that you have to weigh with Jalen Moss.
Right. I almost put Mikey Keene in the quarterback sleeper list. I don't think he's going to be anything amazing, but it's just one of those guys that you can throw in during bye weeks and stuff like that, injuries or whatever. Especially, we're going to talk about it when we do these 3 QB C2C leagues. I'll tell you what, there were some weeks last year where I'm like, I'm throwing in random players that I've never even heard of. Just like, please score me 8 points or whatever. I would love to have a Mikey Keene in that spot instead of whatever crap I was throwing in last year. So some of those bye weeks, like once you later on in the season when those injuries start accumulating and everything, and then those bye weeks hit, it is rough. I'm not going to lie. But I think that brings us to one of our favorite players of this list. And the crazy part is like, if we had to list them in order of how we feel about them, I feel like it would probably be Jace Brown at 1, and yet he's going as the wide receiver 111 and 273rd overall. That math ain't mathing.
No, it's not. And he's going a lot earlier than that in the drafts I've been seeing, or at least with the folks I've been talking to. And Jace Brown for Kansas State is just very intriguing based on what he did as a true freshman, and he's Power 5. So that gives him a little bit of a boost over like a G5 type of guy like Jalen Moss. But yeah, Jace Brown, I think he's a fun player. He can win all over the field. And Avery Johnson there is also an intriguing quarterback going into his second season, set to take over at Kansas State. They showed just tremendous chemistry. And I love that for Jace Brown, that he can be paired with the quarterback that trusts him and that likes to target him early and often. There's just not a lot of competition there in that wide receiver core that I'm afraid of. So for me, Jace Brown makes a lot of sense because another guy where I'm putting my money where my mouth is. I drafted him in this draft. I'll have to look up exactly what slot that was at, but yes, I certainly am a fan. I know we're not the only ones. I guess shout out Dirty Mike, right, from the CTC crew, and there's other guys out there in the industry who are really starting to talk about him more and more. So just know that the days of getting him late in drafts, especially this late, are kind of over, but Jace Brown still is going too late in a lot of drafts.
Yeah, that's another one where it just doesn't seem like the ADP is quite caught up. But if that is the case, if somebody's going off of ADP for their draft, then you might be able to get him a little bit later than you should. I think that he actually has another player that has Devy viability, like that, actually could be a Devy player. At the very least, you have multiple years of campus scoring ahead for Jace Brown there. And then we have a couple more players here that I don't know how excited you are for. Justice Ross Simmons out of Syracuse and Jordan Moore out of Duke. I think that for me with Ross Simmons, it's more just like he's a fairly proven player going to kind of an ambiguous situation again, like that kind of thing. We have Riley Leonard going over there, Riley moved on to Notre
Kyle
Dame.
McCord, right?
Kyle McCord, that's
Yeah.
We have all the transfers. We have Kyle McCord going over there, who wasn't this amazing quarterback or anything like that, but he was fine. Like, he was okay, and I think he can get the ball to Ross Simmons. But he's going as wide receiver 189th and 319th overall, and just like somebody that I think is going to score points for you. Like, once again, at the very least, bye week fill-ins, injury fill-ins, all that kind of stuff. So how are you feeling about Ross Simmons there?
Yeah, I mean, I don't mind that call at all. Like you said, potentially a guy who can take off as stepping up as a wide receiver 1 in a system, because he wasn't going to get that at Colorado State. I guess that's my biggest concern. It's like, well, if we're saying that, he's an intriguing guy based on what he's done already, then we must love Torrey Horton, which I know I do. I don't truly know your thoughts on him, but yeah, I'm definitely a big Torrey Horton fan for what he is, as far as like a G5 type of prospect. So
Ross Simmons already put up pretty damn good numbers, even with Horton being better and all that. I'm not saying like I would rather have Horton, but Ross Simmons put up pretty good numbers, and once again, he was more efficient with his touches, that showing that big playability and stuff like that. And so like he can go and be the one at Syracuse, and that might only get you so excited, which is fine. But he's being drafted as the 189th wide receiver,
Yeah, exactly. At that price, I like it. And the other guy you mentioned, Jordan Moore, who is a Duke wide receiver, is a guy I actually just drafted because I've been seeing him propped up as potentially a top 20, 30 or so CFF asset this season at the wide receiver position. So he is just set to suck up some targets there at Duke. I mean, Jalen Calhoun left. He was the only other guy in town, I guess, as far as the wide receiver core. Jordan Moore is somewhat proven. So he's a converted quarterback. His first season he came in, he was going to play quarterback, and they're like, nope, you are way more talented at wide receiver. So let's just put you there. It took him a year to really figure it out, but he produced right away that next season. And then this last season, he was a little bit banged up. So I think that affected his production a little bit, but he started to come on and he showed again good production. I think 800 some receiving yards, and now he's set to take a step forward. I am curious to see what Duke's passing offense ultimately looks like, but there are folks out there who are legitimately excited for at least a competent enough offense out there. So I'm not saying it's going to be the most prolific offense, but this guy's just going to be fed targets. And like you said at the beginning of the show, sometimes just targets alone are valuable. So I could see him definitely surpassing 100 targets, and probably going over 1,000 yards this season. I think that seems like a fair projection as the clear alpha there for Duke. And I honestly like his film a lot too. Very smooth, very slippery, versatile type of player. Not the most dominant physically, but I do think that the smooth agility, jukes, those types of moves, those subtle moves that he puts out there are intriguing. So I think Jordan Moore is set to have a very good season. Another one where it's like, well, might as well have a good CFF starting option, or at least a fill-in for your starting lineup on your team this late in drafts. Heck yeah, sign me up for it.
Yeah, I like the call. I'm a little concerned with Malik Murphy being the quarterback, and like what's going to happen with that. He was definitely not the greatest at Texas, but I really wonder if Moore could be like a 5th or 6th round pick in the NFL draft. Like I don't think he's going to be amazing, but I feel like he can kind of sneak in there. You were talking about Jalen Calhoun was an undrafted free agent, and like I don't hate Calhoun. So if I don't hate Calhoun and Moore's better, then like maybe we can get that like 5th, 6th, 7th round pick for him. And it's some kind of Devy viability, whatever. But that's going to bring us to another undrafted player, and like one of my favorite players that is going undrafted. I actually have him 2 spots, and this is probably wrong, but I have him 2 spots ahead of Jace Brown in my ranks right now, and I love Jace Brown. So like I said, this is probably wrong, and my system completely just froze, so I have nothing to go off of. But I will say that Jordan Faison from Notre Dame, he's going undrafted in C2C ranks and everything as we speak, but in a smallish sample as a true freshman, he showed big playability, and like people are really. And the thing is, he's more like, he's considered more of the slot wide receiver, but yet like he's showing big playability from the slot, and people really are all about the other slot wide receiver out of Notre Dame. But I really feel like when it's all said and done, it's going to be Faison that ends up hitting, because I don't know. Like I don't love Riley Leonard, but Faison has done enough to where I can see I got everything back here. It's 17.7 yards per reception as a true freshman, a 13.3 ADOT, which they have him listed as the slot receiver. A 13.3 ADOT ain't no slot receiver, or if it is, they're doing something pretty special with them. 3.8 PPR points per touch, which is pretty damn good. 3.49 yards per team pass attempt as a true freshman. And nothing amazing in the market share or anything like that, but once again, a true freshman. So yeah, give me some Jordan Faison. But the thing is, like, you're not paying anything for him. Like, you can literally throw him in at the end of drafts, but like the dude might actually be a legit stud. And it's not like Notre Dame isn't putting anyone into the NFL or anything like that. So yeah, I love Faison here.
Yeah, Jordan Faison seems like one of those guys where he's just going to continue to grow, I guess, in his involvement within that offense, because there are guys exiting that Notre Dame team, and there's certainly opportunity there. Now they're bringing some guys in, but I guess ultimately, I just don't really. I don't really know what the true upside is with Faison. Is he going to stick to football? That's another question too, just because he's such a good lacrosse player. But I mean, again, you make so much more in football. So if he has a chance to be a really, like an NFL type drafted wide receiver, let's say, Faison might just choose that route. So he has some of the movement abilities. His jukes are kind of crazy. So he's very elusive, but like you said, he's also explosive. He can win down the field, but he is a little bit more of that slot or inside type of guy. So I am curious to see how Notre Dame ultimately, I guess, uses him. And I am a little bit skeptical of the CFF upside, but that did not stop me from taking him in this supplemental draft. So I took him in the 11th round, actually. So that was one of the guys. Like Jacoby Lane actually just got he was selected ahead of me. So I had to pivot to Faison there. So not mad about that whatsoever.
I love it. You're gonna have to take him earlier than that in our draft. I can promise you that much. But
Yeah.
we have the boss in the chat saying, make sure you like this video, subscribe to the channel. Of course, obviously, we really do appreciate you guys listening to this brand new team and everything, whatever you want to call it. Obviously, the podcast isn't new, but we're new to Optimus Fantasy. We need as many likes and subscribes, get as many eyes on the new team as quickly as possible. So if you enjoyed this at all, like it, subscribe it, do all that kind of stuff on YouTube. Make sure you check out Optimus Fantasy on Twitter. Check out Aaron Wilcox on Twitter. Check out me, Dynasty Coach A, on Twitter. Do you have any idea what we might be talking about next time? This time of year's a little rough. We don't always know exactly what we're going to talk about for the next pod. But Aaron, do you have any ideas moving forward? Because last time we said, hey, we're going to do C2C sleepers. Like we promise you guys. So do we have anything for the listeners this time?
You know what? Just speculation at this point. But you know me, I'm always coming up with some ideas. We'll have something fun. I mean, we covered the 2025 class this last episode. Maybe we could do a sneak peek at 2026 class, or again, maybe covering some incoming freshmen again. We've covered that in the past though. So if you want to see some of that freshman specific content for your supplementals, or if you're just curious to see what the landscape looks like with some of these guys coming into college football, we have covered that already too. So go back and certainly listen to that episode.
Yeah, the 26 class might be an interesting pod because there's hardly anyone that's actually proven. So it might be a lot of discovering who you like, who I like, and all that kind of stuff, and just trying to figure out who the hell is going to hit in that class. Because right now it is wide open. But once again, make sure you're following everyone. Make sure you're following Optimus Fantasy. If you enjoyed this pod and it was your first time listening, we want to hear from you. So whether it's hitting us up on Twitter, sliding in the DMs, or just joining us on the next podcast, and we love, obviously the comments throughout, answering questions. We love doing all that kind of stuff. But for now, we're going to go ahead and cash out. We really do appreciate each and every one of you guys. Thank you.